to do our pre-council as part of our directors meeting. So welcome everyone, and of course the Open Meetings Act is posted at the rear of the hearing room. The floor is yours.
Okay, so I'm going to try to go through this fairly quickly given our time limits, but I wanted to open it up kind of with an overview of the city debt, and then Donna's going to go into more specifics. So we'll try to keep this fairly short and then allow time for questions as well from the members. So real quickly, we have generally three different types of debt that the city utilizes. So we have governmental debt, revenues, revenue debt, and then leases. You're going to see all three of those on the council agenda today. Just to give you a little information, governmental debt, we have about $420 million outstanding, leases $39 million, and $148 million in revenue. Governmental debt is basically debt that is supported by taxes and intergovernmental revenue. You can see of the total debt that we have for governmental, the West Haymarket JPA, you see that on there, those bonds. They're an actual separate legal entity, but for auditing purposes, we actually have to incorporate them onto our books. So when rating agencies look at the total debt of the city, we have to include the JPA. So you can see the majority of the outstanding bonds there for JPA purposes. That includes this piece of the pie right here of $326 million, and then these turnback tax bonds of $23 million. Today, for one of the issues, the stormwater issue, well, that'll be a general obligation debt of the city. We have revenue bond type debt that's supported by fees and charges. So what you're seeing in the graph is outstanding debt at the end of 17-18. So, we've got water revenue bonds, we have state revolving fund loan bonds, wastewater, water, solid waste, parking revenue. So those are the majority of the debt that was outstanding as of 17-18 that are revenue. In addition, we have lease purchase type agreements that the city uses. So these are basically annual payments that the city makes for the lease of property. So we have two different types that are primarily utilized. We have lease purchase agreements. Those are primarily for capital type purchases of equipment, and they're generally financed through banks. All of these are approved by or come to the city council for approval. And then we have another type of lease purchase agreement called certificates of participation. So that's something that's allowed through state statute. Those are bonds. These ones are actually sold at market to investors instead of like the other ones that are just sold directly to a bank. So investors, institutional type banks, individual investors are buying these at market. And then we make regular payments for the acquisition of that property on an annual basis. One of the bonds today that you'll be talking about is certificates of participation for streetlights. Okay, so the proposed debt you have on the agenda, you have the certificates of participation, which is the lease purchase type agreement. You have a wastewater revenue bond, a stormwater governmental bond, and then a water refinancing, which is a revenue bond. Their certificates of participation are approximately $3.7 million. They're for street lights. So in general, I think there can be a little bit of confusion on street lights, so I want to talk about three components real quick. So one component that we have are energy and maintenance charges. So that is to fund the ongoing energy that we pay for, that we use for streetlights, and then the general overall maintenance of the system, since we own all the streetlights in the city of Lincoln. That is budgeted on an annual basis, and we pay that to LES, and that's paid out of our general fund. So that's maintenance type items. In addition, we have capital investment items. And the capital investments are what you're seeing today. So that's what this $3.7 million is for. So in 2004, 2005, the city actually purchased the streetlight system from LES. And the city actually did that as a way to save money because of the amount of interest in financing charges that we were paying through LES. So we bought the system through the savings. We paid off that, and then we have continued to invest in the system for our capital type purchases through issuance of COPS on an annual basis. So within the last budget cycle, we budgeted for 2 issuances of COPS, specifically for streetlight investments. And then a third thing that's been talked about a lot recently is the streetlight conversion project. So, and this is in general, that basically converted all of the fixtures, but what we're asking today for the 3.7 million is for the 80% of the cost. So it's a 20% of the cost of the poles and the fixture. We're talking about the 80% of the cost in the pole, the conduit, the electrical wiring. So these are used to basically build out or rebuild current streetlight systems. They're utilized when Public Works goes through and upgrades a street. You know, we use some of that money to pay for the system upgrades. They're used to pay for pole replacements, or when people hit our poles and we have hit and runs, that money comes out of this kind of bucket to pay for that ongoing. So the streetlight conversion project should defer some future costs because we're paying for the 20%, but we still have the 80% remaining within the pole and the conduit that we have to pay for on an annual basis. So that's really paying for the upgrade of the 80% of that cost. In addition, you have a stormwater bond on the agenda, and Donna's going to go into more of the specifics. I'm just kind of talking about structure. So that's for $9.9 million. That was placed on the ballot by the City Council in March of 2019. The voters approved that May 7th with 56% approval. So that's $9.9 million spread over 20 years. It's a general obligation bond, so it's backed by the full faith and credit and taxing authority of the city. So we're pledging to repay that, basically no matter what happens with our taxing authority. One thing about this, as we move forward and look at the upcoming budget, this will require a budget amendment for the 1920 budget because we didn't budget for a payment of those bonds. So as we move forward, moving into August, you'll see some amendments basically to budget for which will require a small increase in the tax rate to pay for these bonds that were voted on by the people. And then we also have 2 utility bonds. The wastewater bonds, Donna's going to go in more depth about on the projects. It's $25 million or $29 million financed over 25 years. These are all tax exempt financing. Estimated annual payments on that about $1.7 million. That's already baked into the rates that have been approved. That was approved in the budget. In addition, we have water refinancing bonds, which is a great thing. We're saving $1.5 million. GFOA, or government finance officers, typically recommends that you have a threshold of somewhere between 3 to 5% for refundings. These have a 13%, so we're in great shape on refinancing these. We're not extending the life of the term of the bonds at all. They'll be repaid over the remaining term, and we're not adding any new money, so it's just a straight savings for the utilities.
Brandon, is it 1.5 million total savings?
1.5 million total savings.
Total savings,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Donna.
Unless anyone has any questions. Donna and Brandon will take questions at the end too.
Made it go away.
Uh-oh.
There you go.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay.
It's good. You want to switch?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, council members, both new and returning. Good to see you. My name is Donna Garden. I'm the Assistant Director of Utilities in Lincoln Transportation Utilities Department. And I'm going to talk a little bit about wastewater today, but I also want to let you know that if you have any questions about utilities, feel free to call me anytime. And tours are available for anybody, so just let us know. We'll take you out and show you the Ashland plant or the wastewater plants or anywhere else you'd like to go throughout our utility systems. Let me get you started with the wastewater revenue bond. It's a big bond. It's about $29 million. So I want to talk a little bit about how we came up with that number, and we actually had that into our model for the budget this last go-round. So the rates have been raised in accordance to pay for this bond. So let me talk a little bit about it. We start out, and I've had this kind of slide up before. We build it on a very strong foundation. We start with the comprehensive plan. We develop our programs based on a master plan that shows how we're going to grow and where we're going to grow, and making sure that we have the infrastructure there in place to be able to cover that growth of the city. That's where our CIP, our capital improvement program, is based upon. And then, of course, we have operations and projects, and then we have to decide how we finance all of these types of things. But I just want to make sure that we are following real strong building blocks to be able to put this together. And I also want to add that we build before we grow. So in order to maintain our systems for the everyone in Lincoln and have adequate infrastructure out there for growth, we need to go ahead and invest this money ahead of the time that our ratepayers are there to pay for it. So by the time ratepayers are in place and growth has occurred, we're already on to the next infrastructure project out there. We often talk about our rate models for water. And I want to say, first of all, that wastewater is entirely funded by rate revenues. There's no taxes involved associated with our utilities, water and wastewater. And we have a rate model that's very comprehensive and it's very dynamic. We take into account historical data, actual and forecast expenditures and operation and capital improvements, and we look at the effect of issuing these types of bonds, and so we can include in those rate models the debt service and cash on hand that's required. The model allows us to predict when bond dollars are needed based upon our capital improvement program and what the future debt service will be. And from this, we can set rates to meet the demands of operations and our capital improvements. So basically, I want to comment here that we have got this included in the last biennium budget. So we asked for 5% rate increases during this biennium. And the resolution was passed, and therefore that covers the cost of the issuance of this $29 million bond. So there's no additional rate increases that we'll be asking for with this. I also want to make note that in January, reimbursement resolution was passed in council, and what that does is it allows us to take these bond dollars that will come as revenue to us now and use them to actually pay for expenses that were incurred 60 days prior to that reimbursement resolution. So that means about November 14th, I think, or 15th is the date of cutoff. And anything after that point we can pay for. And that includes a lot of the Stevens Creek project, which is one of the biggest ones we have. I want to assure you that, I know this is hard to see, but there's a lot of cities there listed on the bottom of that chart, and I showed this during the budget discussion as well. But Lincoln is about fourth on this long list in terms of our cost of wastewater to our actual ratepayers. You can see some of the numbers of average monthly bills up there where Lincoln's about 24, Denver's about 30. Omaha is very high. They have a $63. They are also working on trying to correct their combined sewer overflow system. Here's the list of projects that we will be using bond dollars on. Stevens Creek is kind of tops the list there. About $11 million of that project, which is about a $15 million project, can be covered with bond dollars. We have some expansion to do at the Northeast Water Resource Recovery Facility, about $4.5 million there. That is part of our solids handling at that facility. We have two resource recovery facilities in town, one at Teresa Street and one at Northeast. Beal Slough, we will be putting in a new parallel trunk sewer along Beal Slough. That adds to be able to handle sanitation for the southeast part of Lincoln, because that has grown a lot. Southwest Village is also, southwest of town, which is growing, 3 million there. Some additional capacity improvements at Teresa Street, West A, and additional influent pumping, all based on new growth projects that are happening throughout the city. And here's kind of a general overall picture of where these things are occurring. Obviously, Stevens Creek being the largest piece that opens up that eastern part of the city of Lincoln. And then, of course, additions and growth projects on our treatment plants. But I wanted to make a comment that if you look at our overall budget in wastewater, both operating and capital improvement, about 50% of it goes to capital improvement projects. And then 56% of that capital improvement budget actually goes to new growth projects, at least in this particular biennium that we're in right now. So this money will be put to good use for those types of projects. Any questions on the wastewater revenue bond?
Benny, go ahead.
Thank you. Ginger flexing over like crazy. I'm looking at the black lines. That's the proposed new construction on your map.
It is.
And so the southwest trunk line goes from where to where? And I see where the resource recovery facilities are. I don't make the connection between those.
The southwest trunk line is over here in the southwest portion of Lincoln.
How does that get to Teresa Street or Northeast?
Oh, how does it connect? It does. It all connects through a long series of sewers. Actually, there's a trunk line that runs up Salt Creek. That's
Okay.
one of our main trunk lines that goes all the way up to Teresa Street. Stevens Creek is drained. All the Stevens Creek watershed is drained to the northeast facility, and all of the rest of the city is drained to Teresa Street that handles that.
So are the existing?
Already existing, correct.
Richard.
Has the Beal Slough been designed?
It has been
Engineered.
designed, and I think it has been bid.
Okay. So it's enough to cover all the growth areas and future growth areas?
Should be for quite a while, yes.
Okay, good. To the bypass.
Mm-hmm. It's a good point, yes. Okay. I'm gonna move on to the stormwater bond here. Maybe. I don't really have a whole lot other than just to let folks know about, or remind all of you about what the projects were that were included in this stormwater bond. There we go. And this is, as Brandon said, is a general obligation bond, and unlike the other facilities like water and wastewater, stormwater is not a utility and it's not an enterprise fund, so it does not have rates associated with it. All of our capital improvements in stormwater come strictly from bond dollars, and they have for a number of years. We've had 14 bonds, now 15 bonds, with the passage of this one that have passed by voters since 1977. 7 of those bonds have been retired. 4 of the remaining 7 bonds have been refinanced to a lower interest rate. And what this amounts to in terms of the average homeowner in Lincoln, average homeowner of about $183,000 home, is about $6 annually. That will cover the work from this stormwater bond. These are the projects that are proposed in the 2019 stormwater bond. The biggest one, obviously, is Dead Man's Run Flood Reduction Project. This is in conjunction with FEMA and the U.S. Corps of Engineers. They're partners with us in this project, as well as the local NRD and UNL. The Corps of Engineers is actually providing about $10 million of this money that goes towards this project. So it's a big project for us. Forest Lake Boulevard Flood Reduction Project has been on the list for about 12 years. We're finally now getting to it, and I think it's welcome, especially this year with all the rain that we've had. I know we've had some reports in that area already of a lot of water in the area. Doing some channel stabilization in a number of the parks around town. And then we have some Little Salt Creek grade control that's just helping prevent erosion in Little Salt Creek. Street drainage projects, urban storm drain projects, and the drainage master plan are kind of all a small little bit of money that goes to those and is available so that we have street drainage issues, we can actually go out and take care of them when they come up. This is a lot of detail on the Dead Man's Run project. As you can see, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers putting in $10 million. These city bond funds, we're taking $6.6 million of the $9.9 million in the bond that will go to this project. And NRD is matching that funds. And that's really about all I
Got a
have.
question?
I want to stop there for a second on the 480 structures. I want to talk about the savings there. You says it saves an average of, if I can read that right, $450 to $2,400 per property owner.
Yeah, this 480 structures are taken out of the floodplain. They no longer need to have flood insurance on those houses if they have any type of debt, mortgage, or anything on that. If you look at the houses and the different types of even businesses, you're looking at anywhere from $450 per annual cost to $2,400 per structure.
Structure.
Richard?
Is there a map out there yet?
On the actual,
Yeah, showing where the floodplain may change?
I think I've got it right here. I know it's hard to see, but the dark
Stuff in the crosshatch is,
is all coming out of the floodplain, correct?
okay.
And Donna, how long have we been talking about Dead Man's Run? The restoration, rehabilitation, and investment in it?
I'm not sure the number of years, but it's quite a few. I had a number of citizens call and say, I thought we already had the money and we're going to do this before the election. So it was a surprise that we hadn't since it's been
There's
a long
been
time.
projects ongoing for, as long as I've been on the council,
Right.
that have started downstream and are gradually moving upstream.
Okay.
Because you have to do downstream before you do upstream.
That's right.
This is more upstream,
Mhm.
midstream.
Any other questions?
Say that out loud.
Any other questions, Richard?
I just told him, we've been talking about it since 1970, 71, in Gateway,
Wow.
Mm.
and the dealership was put on Dead's Man Run out there. They've been working on this since then.
Since the moon landing.
Okay. Does that conclude the
That's
presentation?
all I have today.
Well, thank you. I think it would help if we had PowerPoint presentations for all of us,
Yeah.
if you wouldn't mind sending it.
Have
That was a great tutorial on the budget, so thank you. Richard?
Got some quick questions on these COP bond, well, on all the bonds. On the COP bonds, UBT's buying them all at this point. Do we shop that to other banks?
I think UBT's typically been trustee. We've also used, I think, Wells Fargo, and there's one more trustee that we typically utilize.
I didn't know if that's chosen, how that's chosen, or,
Typically, I think it's either, I think past it's been in the bond ordinance who the trustee. I think moving forward, I think that's been taken out and it's placed in the hands of the finance director to choose who the trustee is going to be.
okay.
Yeah. I think in general, we like a local presence.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to get a hold of people, let's say, at a Union Bank than if you're dealing with somebody at Wells Fargo that's based out of Chicago. So,
And then on the GO bonds and such, on the stormwater bonds, it sounds like we're going to go for the full amount. Do you usually go for the full amount when you go out for bonding, all at once? And then-
I think yes, typically we do. So the bond or the election puts the kind of specific amount, and then like we typically authorize that full
we have a
amount.
window to purchase it because 1 week might be a lot better than another week.
I think more than anything right now is the timing issue.
Right.
So in addition to these four, parking bond was also approved. So right now it's more of how do we get these all to market without taking them out all at the same time. So we're trying to structure these. We kind of have an order that we would go out and sell them in. So, parking's kind of first, then wastewater, then the GO bond, then either the refinancing or COP. So we're trying to structure them so we're not going out to market at the same time. We don't want to saturate investors' appetite for the City of Lincoln debt.
So we're giving you the flexibility, timing,
Yeah,
after we authorize them?
yes.
Okay, good.
Great. Thank
If-
you all very much.
If you have any more
Appreciate-
questions, we're available.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. So we're going to go ahead and proceed with the directors' meeting at this point in time. And